Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Richard Morchoe. Today
I'm
we
Gus
have
Steeves. How are you again?
today we have Gus Steeves for the Long Hill Report, and we're going to discuss the issues of the day. And I'll let Gus start with an issue that came up recently.
Okay. Well, we kind of started talking. It's one of those circumstances where, as we were talking to Drew a minute ago, that sometimes you ought to see this stuff before we actually go on, because that's where then we have to get back into the flow again. But what we were talking about a few minutes ago is there was an interesting article on Ars Technica, which is primarily it looks at primarily at technology issues, and in this case, it was talking about Elon Musk and the fact that I guess it's his own either biography or autobiography, talks about the fact that last year he actually went in there and shut off his Starlink satellite system, which he had specifically brought into Ukraine to assist their war effort. But he shut it off when the Ukrainians were trying to go.
Background, what Starlink is for.
Oh, it's basically, it allows the Ukrainian system to attach to the satellite internet system. And basically, it allows them to attach into, as I understand it, attach into the global GPS system, among other things. And so anyway, the Starlink system, the Ukrainians were trying to use the Starlink system to send one of their drone submarines to attack the Russian Navy in Ukraine, in Crimea. And somehow he got wind of it and he shut it off so that their drone sub ended up basically just running aground harmlessly. And he specifically wrote that he had done so because he had spoken to Moscow about the fact that if they were attacked in that kind of a way, the Russians would very likely start using nukes.
They would probably have started using tactical nukes, but that would not stop in Ukraine.
Well, probably not, I would think. I mean, that's what almost everybody says. You start using tactical nukes. There's no real difference between tactical nukes and strategic nukes except in size and how far they can fly, really. So it would be a moot point within, a day, probably. So anyway, so he shut the Starlink system off. The Ukrainians screamed and yelled and wanted him to turn it back on. And as of at the end of the article, from what I was reading, the Pentagon took over several hundred of them, and now they're controlling, I don't know how much of the Starlink network, but they're controlling a significant part of it. Which says a lot, that specifically because they didn't want Musk putting his own opinion on something that they consider to be U.S. policy. And as we were talking about at the very beginning, I think it says a couple of different things. One is that I'm glad that he did it, but I think because we don't obviously want nuclear war. But I think it says a lot that he went into the Ukraine, put in this whole Starlink system to make himself millions of dollars at the expense of anything that would be sane foreign policy, just because he wanted to make money off of it.
Okay, now, was he just going into Ukraine, or was he doing this all over the world?
I believe.
And was this just sort of Ukraine taking the initiative to do it on their own?
Well, he did. I remember seeing stories about it maybe a year or so ago, where he specifically was talking. At the time, he's been doing it around the world in general, but he was specifically going into Ukraine and giving them Starlink systems, specifically because of the war. Mm-hmm. And the article specifically pointed out that he was doing it to aid their war effort. But he also specifically said he didn't want to aid that aspect of their war effort.
And that makes perfect sense.
It seems like a sane limit, yes.
And,
but he shouldn't have been.
Well, you remember, supposedly there were sane limits a long time ago that were not going to be done.
And they've crossed all of them.
Not giving the F-16s, which would just get blasted out of the sky. They're not the up-to-date technology. And the up-to-date technology, the F-35, isn't that great anyway.
Right. Or the tanks, or a bunch of other things.
What do you call them? The shells, and the depleted, now they're giving depleted uranium
they
shells.
said that this week.
which is kind of a nuclear weapon in a
It
sense.
is. And that's what the Russians have treated it as. And
Yeah.
that they've specifically said that they'll treat the F-16s as if they're nuclear.
Yeah, well, they will be kind of, they won't stay in the sky that long.
Probably not. I mean, they're only getting, what, 30 of them or something like
Something
that?
like
40
that.
maybe? They'll last about a week.
So it's hard to say how this war will end up, but everything, the counteroffensive has been a failure. This great counteroffensive
Oh, yeah.
has been a failure. Everything we've done in it has been not a good idea.
Except it's been wonderful for the bottom lines
Yeah.
of, Raytheon and Lockheed
Oh,
and,
yeah.
that crap.
Yeah. And you said to me about an interview with
Senator Warren.
Liz Warren
Yep.
on WBUR. You want to talk about that for you?
Well, I was listening to it and that was actually sent on to us from a couple of places. And it was just interesting that you're listening to her. She said she went over to the Ukraine, and it was such propaganda. And it was she was making such a big deal of supporting the war effort on the grounds of exactly the same domino theory nonsense that they were saying 50 years ago about the communists. That if we didn't stop them there, she said something ridiculous about they're going to come attack our babies here. And other ridiculous nonsense. I mean, I'm sorry. It's like, Senator Warren, what are you going to be? What do you expect them to do? Sardinera dogs next?
Well,
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, if they let's put it this way: if it ever gets to the point where the Russians are attacking our children here in the U.S., it's because the nukes are flying,
yep.
and there's a reason for that. It's because our policies have gotten to be just insane and stupid.
The Russians have, whatever they have, they do not have a navy large enough to cross the ocean.
Except for their subs.
No, I mean to cross the ocean to invade.
No, definitely.
So Liz is so absurd. But in this one-party little North Korea we live in, what do you expect? I mean, her opposition when she first ran, what's his name, Brown, he was no prize.
No.
Wasn't any worse than her, but he wasn't a shining star in any sense. But this woman, it leads you to understand how she got elected. First of all, she's an affirmative action. She claimed affirmative action to get into the Ivy League. She'd be probably at East Overshoe State teaching croquet or something if she hadn't got into the Ivies. And by lying, essentially lying, she's claiming, oh, come on. You have such just looking at you, you have only oh, my grandpa or somebody, he looked Indian.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So,
I mean, I can claim one Indian ancestor from like 1820.
you look it, you really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I look Indian. I'm sure.
Okay, Iowa, can we let's go along Hiawatha now.
I'm not Native American. I've never said that one.
And well, it is you didn't try to get into the Ivy League.
No.
And she's just, let's spend on everything. Let's do this, let's do that. She's on Twitter or whatever they're calling it now. There is, where does this end?
Well, I think the problem is that unfortunately, we've seen so much. Is that as you know, I tend to lean more toward the left end of the spectrum.
Wait a minute, where's my pacemaker?
Right. But what's I think is really upsetting for me is when you look at the people who nominally are more liberal or on the left end of the spectrum, and I think we need to make a distinction between liberals and leftists because they're not the same. Most of the liberals in our government today are neoliberals. They're very much capitalists.
They're former liberals is what they are.
Sometimes they're former liberals, yes. they don't really understand what it actually means to work for the people. Sometimes they say the right things. Sometimes they propose decent bills. But I think they do it knowing that it has no chance of passing. Because they can say, okay.
That's
Because
been
they
a
can
practice in the Congress forever.
It has been. Because they can say, hey, I'm doing this for you.
Yeah.
I'm fighting for you.
Yes.
Blah, 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 blah. Give me more donations over here.
Well, that's certainly Liz and just about every state rep figures he's going to be president someday until
Maybe.
he's indicted or something worse.
And unfortunately, most of the reps and senators at the federal level have become basically useless.
Yeah, that's really. But it's the absurdity of a system having two parties, just two parties, basically. I mean,
Really the same party.
I can at least vote for somebody I like, even though I know they're not going to win. But the two parties, even if they're different, which in some aspects they might be, you're getting a choice between A and a choice between B. Choice between Tweedledee and choice between Tweedle. And it never changes.
No.
It's really, all those people who in the Trump impeachment were going, our democracy, our democracy.
I know. It's not our democracy. It's their democracy.
Yeah, and it will continue.
And they know it. And they know that
And
that's the way if we keep funding our system in the way that we've been funding it for decades, it will stay their democracy.
How would you fund it? How would you fund it? That's the problem.
That is a problem, and I agree with that. But I mean, the system we have now is blatantly corrupt.
Absolutely.
So, quite honestly, almost anything would be better than this.
You know that guy who did,
provided we don't have a war.
You know the guy who does the videos that he goes in and his name O'Keefe or something.
Which one?
James O'Keefe or something. I don't know.
I recognize the name. He used to
goes
be a
in-
libertarian candidate for something, wasn't he?
No. He goes in and he gets into a place and they interview somebody and they don't know they're being interviewed.
Oh, that thing. Okay.
And he had somebody from BlackRock. And the guy says, "You can buy a senator for, I don't know if he said $56,000. It's the easiest thing to buy a senator."
Sure it is, yeah.
He's got the guy on it. It's nothing will ever come because BlackRock is essentially owning America.
Oh yeah.
But this is the system, and okay, get money. I did a video with Dick.
Mm-hmm.
I had spoken with him before, and I've also written about it. And when I first said it to him, he said, "That's crazy. That's crazy. And they said, "You got to do a video on this."
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically the idea that we buy these candidates. Somebody buys them and puts up all the money, and it's not decided fair in any way. And you know what? The people can't really decide between two of them. The two of the body, because the media is now goes in full bore on them.
Sometimes.
And tells them how to vote. Says the worst things about one of the candidates and the best things about the other, whatever.
Well, sometimes, or it's an issue that they will only say this much of the truth, and they'll ignore all of these issues over here.
So that system is what we have,
Unfortunately.
and you can't get the money out of it and still have all these primaries and stuff like that.
I agree.
So what was my suggestion? I said, what can people do? A person, your average Joe, can't know about the Federal Reserve and how its machinations. It can't know really about military policy.
Right.
And all the other things, and about any of the really, really technical stuff. Even people who are, some are kind, I have friends like doctorates in anthropology and stuff. They're not going to be able to discuss the Federal Reserve. No. They'll be able to discuss it on the same level I can, and I'm interested.
Right.
But they're not get into the weeds. What can we do about this? Well, what can the average person do? I can say this about West Brookfield. One of the most painful things I do, and you don't feel this, is go to the town meeting, because it goes on too long. But I know the people in the town. I know who's running, who could run for office, who does a good job,
Right.
who doesn't do a good job.
Right.
Could I vote for, in a meeting, the best person among us, man or woman? Could I help to choose that as the best person?
Hopefully.
Now,
Theoretically.
that's something you can do.
Yeah.
So what we get so many electoral votes in a state. Every town about the size of West Brookfield, and every city break it out into precincts as they do it. They choose the best person among them.
Mm-hmm.
And those people go to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And we winnow that down, and we have an assembly of, say, maybe 50 or 60 of those people. And they choose the best among them. For how many electors do we have? We have 12 or 11 or something.
In Massachusetts?
Yeah. I think it might
I
be
think it's
11.
11.
11. And they choose the 11. They choose, and we're asking them not, your duty here is to choose the best among you, not the smartest. Well, we'd like a level of intelligence, but not the richest.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that would be,
No.
that would be, the question I would immediately come to mind is, how would you ensure that they're choosing the one who is
How do you
the
ensure what we're
best
choosing now?
representative of the people
Well,
themselves?
that's why
as
you have a
opposed
whole.
to-
That's why you have a whole caucus. You say it's a Saturday for the first one. Anybody can come, and a lot of people wouldn't come. Fine, I'm okay with that if you don't want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, everybody gets together and they talk it out for the whole day.
Yeah,
They caucus it for the whole day.
it's basically an old town meeting.
Then,
The
yeah,
original
and
way of
your
doing it,
only your only job is to pick the best person among you. Then the next level, they go
Do
for
that.
a whole
They do
day,
that, yeah.
and then you get the number of your electors,
Mm-hmm.
and they choose among nobody. They choose when you get all of them, and you put them all to say. I don't want them in Washington because nothing good happens there, but put them say in East Overshoe, North Dakota, or wherever they will get together, and they will like the College of Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
They're separate from everybody, and they were who is the best person in the country, and they can invite anybody to interview. But running for office is a joke.
Well, it has become a corrupt joke. I agree
Yes,
with that.
it is.
But the question is then, how do you? I don't suppose that that kind of a system would be any worse than we have now.
Well, you're getting a winnowing down and getting, and I hope it's actually not just theoretically, the best people, higher than the level of discernment of the average Joe.
Maybe in
June,
theory.
Judy. Yeah, well, in theory. But no, I would say yes, exactly. You couldn't do worse because you've already done it with the theory of the best person to start with. You will have a lot of people not coming because I don't have any interest. Fair enough. You'll get, in the level of people all the way along, you'll get maybe not Einstein level,
Mm-hmm.
but you will get a higher level of selector. And you can't, I mean,
Maybe.
but
the question
how would
is,
it not
if
be?
you-
How could you not with the?
Well, let me finish. Think about it for a second, though. I mean, the problem is if you are, unless you are figuring out some way to get everybody involved, which granted is almost impossible.
No, I'm not figuring out a way to
finish.
get everybody
Just let me
involved.
Let me finish. Then you are guaranteed that you are going to miss some talents that might really benefit everybody.
Okay. The people who don't want to involved.
If they don't want to be involved, then obviously they don't want to be
Then
involved. I get that.
I'm not going
get
to.
that.
I don't think we should have a dragoon them because we're afraid their talents are being missed. I doubt. I mean, most of us have only a few talents that are better than the average of our life. Like some people are better at math, Some people are just passionate about knowing about history and discerning it.
Right.
And there's a lot of people who just don't have that interest at all, not saying because they're dullards, but because they just don't care. And
There's some that don't, but it's also, they
But
may
we
also
don't
be
want to-
really interested in something else that they do not
If they
see as
wa-
connected to
if they're
the
not
governance.
interested, they're not interested. It's not in their, why should you, I'm going to make you
I'm not
be a
saying that.
genius here.
I didn't say that. I'm saying that we may find that there are issues coming forward because ideally, done right, governance should be trying to come up with the best solutions in a whole slew of different areas, correct?
No.
Why wouldn't it? Because that's what the whole
government,
point of government
no,
is.
government should try to do as little as possible. It should try to do only absolutely what is necessary and nothing else.
Some of
not
those-
a wide slope.
But the
Because they
definition,
botched
but
it.
the, see,
If
that's
anybody
the
thinks they
definition.
haven't,
What do you mean by
if-
what's absolutely necessary?
okay,
That's the
education.
problem.
All right,
Definition.
education is necessary, but government has botched it. And I would
There may
rather.
be some truth to that, but what are you defining education to be?
We've already discussed this.
Yes, but the
and
point is that people in the group may see it differently.
they're not going to do that
may
at
have
a
a broader
caucus.
spectrum-
They're not
with broader
going to.
spectrum
They're
of
not
people
going to do that
involved.
at a
You have
caucus.
different
They're
ways
not
of
going to do
looking
that
at
as at a caucus.
Why not?
It doesn't happen. They're choosing the best person. They're not solving every problem. That's not something that really can be done at a caucus like
not?
that. Well, what?
Why not?
Because your caucus is for a purpose, to choose your best person to go to the next caucus.
So you'll have basically an unending caucus system,
No,
as opposed to.
It's an election of president. Okay. Do
Maybe
you
we
think
don't need a
anything has
president.
been really said sensibly in the presidential elections
No.
about education?
Maybe we don't need a president, period.
I would not. That's one I wouldn't have
Maybe we don't need one.
Maybe we don't. Maybe we. That's why we should go back to the Articles of Confederation.
I think there's some truth to that. Yeah.
But have a single purpose for the day, and only those interested need to come. Otherwise, you put like the Australians. We insist. I think it's the Australia. Yeah, they insist you vote or something.
Yeah,
I think
they legally require
it's a little bit of a fascism. We will make you vote. We will make you do something against your will.
I think it's a good idea to encourage people to get involved.
Nope, I don't.
As much as we can.
I think.
Because I think there's plenty of evidence to show that more people have different viewpoints involved, you will often find a better solution, even though it takes longer to get to
My life history, I've rarely seen that. I would, in fact, I called for the what do you call it? The implant earlier. What do they call that thing in your heart?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I called for that earlier.
Pacemaker. Yes.
Pacemaker.
Yes.
I would call for that in this case too.
Okay. You do that.
Come up with another topic now. Come on.
Well, we kind of drifted way off the original topic, didn't we?
We did, but that's okay. That's not.
Okay.
We might come up with another idea. Let's let it flow.
Hopefully, we should. Yes. Well, I know one thing that we didn't talk about last time, and that it kind of bothers me, and I've kind of been following it to go back into the foreign affairs area, is the nonsense going on in Africa, with Niger and some of those other countries down there that seem to be. Over the last month or so, nothing has really happened, which is probably a good thing. But there's still sort of quiet war drums going on over there. Not so much from our government, more from France and some of the neighboring countries. And it seems to me that this is yet another example of, well, it's a combination of things. It's an example of American ignorance of a place that we, quite frankly, have no reason to be there. We do have forces there. We've got like 1,000 of them.
Well, they're there for a reason, but I want you to continue.
We are running a major drone base there for partially, they claim that it's being used to fight the West African ISIS branch, supposedly. But it's also there because of the fact that we're trying to protect oil interests, uranium interests, copper interests, and a variety of other minerals, supposedly. The French are there too, for the same reason. And of course, with the French specifically, they get something like 20% of their uranium supply for their nuclear power plants from Niger, because that's the country's major export at this point.
Well, I mean, Niger was made famous by Colin Powell.
How so?
Don't you remember he spoke before the
the yellow cake nonsense. Yes,
the yellow
yes.
cake. So this is not a shock that it's all about the resources.
Of course it is.
And one should be aware that it's colonialism.
I know it is.
Completely.
Absolutely.
Of course, we do know. I, as the chairman, chief executive officer, and only member of the Neutralist Association of the U.S., if drafted for president, will withdraw every troop from Niger, Gabon, anywhere they are, and bring them home. But I will also do that from everywhere else.
Yeah,
Cut and run is my motto.
This isn't a matter of, I think it's a matter of bringing them home because we have so much stuff that needs to get done in this country to benefit the American people. And we can use their skills. Building roads and fixing things that have been allowed to deteriorate as the money and resources go to other places around the world and usually just get siphoned off into pockets of people who have way too much of it to begin with.
I think I want to bring them home just because it's wrong that they're there.
I agree.
I don't care. I don't care if they build a road here. I just don't want them. I mean, I do hope they build roads, but that's not my purpose. My purpose is that they're destroying the country, our country.
I agree with that.
But as to saving the money, great. Love the idea. But we have the iceberg of Social Security coming up, which is a lovely thing, I know personally. Mm-hmm. We have that iceberg coming up. We have things that are going to have to change, and it's not just stopping spending defense.
No.
We can't give everything to everybody, but we can. But no politician. It brings there a politician with soul so dead that he doesn't have a pet project that wastes money, or she.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, really, that's the problem. Is that the pet projects that waste money are kind of the flip side of the way democracy is supposed to work. That the whole point of electing some of these politicians is to have them do things for the people that elected them. In practice, it ends up being their own pet projects that benefit the people who fund them, not the people who elect them.
Which is all my points before, that it's not working.
It isn't working. I'm not disagreeing with that.
And it's not going to work. I mean, I would extend my system for electing presidents to electing senators too. Mm-hmm. Because, as I mentioned with BlackRock, bought and sold.
Oh,
but
I think they bought and sold the House too.
I would use sortition for the House of Representatives. Because who is that? Hank Anderson, the guy from one of the southern states. Were you saying he was interviewing a general or an admiral or something in some House hearing about Guam, about all the troops and bases on Guam.
There's like 20 of them,
Yeah. And
I don't remember exactly what
he said, aren't you worried that there'll be too much development on one side of the island and the island of Tacoma? That is.
Didn't they say that about Taiwan too?
No, I don't know, but I know he said it about Guam. Now that's your Congress. Now.
Oh, it tipped over a long time ago. It fell into the swamp.
Yeah.
That was the one thing that Trump said that was true. He didn't do anything about getting rid of the swamp mines.
But I can just imagine the general or admiral, whatever, who was talking with Hank on the congressional hearing.
Yeah.
How he kept the straight. I mean, I have to say, an amazing amount of sang-froid. that he kept a straight face and didn't laugh and say, I quit the army, this is it. This is peak absurdity. I don't know how he did it, but if I were a Hollywood agent, I would call him up, right? We can get, you are one of the greatest actors in history.
The problem is that at that level, I think it gets to the point where they have been there so long and their system is so convolutedly corrupted that they can't understand it is absurd anymore.
So that's
they don't get
that's
it.
why you think
That the rest of us look at him and go, you people are nuts.
You think other congressmen think that Guam would tip over too? Or,
I don't think they necessarily think it literally. No. I'm sure most people don't. But
Hank literally did. And he's still in Congress.
there's an awful lot of dumb people in Congress.
And he's moving up in the leadership.
That doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. I mean, look who's in the White House. Look who was just in the White House. Look who we've had in the White House for the last multiple decades.
Well, anyway.
You mentioned, before we went on, you mentioned the movie Idiocracy. What we've been seeing is the quality of leadership in this country has declined. I think everybody recognizes that. It's not quite to the point of idiocracy yet, but I think it's gone insanity as opposed to idiocracy. But, and we're in a situation where I think it's also a reflection of a lot of the other things. Empires collapse. And maybe it's time that it did. So we can have, but I think we have a controlled collapse rather than chaotic collapse. Well, it would be better for the people.
How do you, if you have such a weird legislative body, how do you control collapse? But as we have reached, if not the end of the line for the empire, the end of the line today.
Yes, we have.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gus Steeves, Richard Morchoe, this has been the Long Hill Report for September. See you in October.
See you in October. Hopefully we're all still here.